and thank you for joining the Extended Day Ahead Market Working Group 3 meeting. This is related to the greenhouse gas and accounting and costs. This is Christina Osborne from the ISO Stakeholder Engagement Group, and I'll be providing support for the meeting. We also have Kevin Head, who is the facilitator for this working group, and Brian Jacobson is the scribe. And we have Phil Pettengale, who is the coordinator overseeing all 3 of the active EDAM working groups. Meetings for this working group are scheduled weekly on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 3, and the participation details for each of the meetings is available on ISO's public calendar. For today's agenda, Kevin will review and finalize the list of design objectives with the group, and then he'll review the first group of scope items, which includes determining what costs EDAM should optimize, identifying GHG compliance areas, and determining the availability rules. So last Friday, we did post the list of design objectives as well as the list of revised scope items on the working group webpage. So those are the lists that he's going to review with the group today. And at the end of the presentation, Brian Jacobson will provide a recap of today's discussion, and then Kevin will review topics for the next meeting. As a reminder, these working groups are intended to be collaborative, and we do encourage participants to share ideas and perspectives. So if at any time you do have a question, please raise your hand and the facilitator will call on you. Just a reminder to please state your name and affiliation first so the rest of the group knows who's speaking. The working group meetings are recorded and video files posted on the corresponding working group web pages. There was a little lapse in posting these videos. I know we received quite a few inquiries about where to find the videos. The video files from last week, all the meetings last week, will be available by end of today, and we do apologize for the delay in getting those posted. And just a reminder to please ask for permission from the ISO before reprinting these transcriptions. Stakeholders are welcome to present their perspectives at these meetings, so if you are interested, please submit a request to present using the link located on the resources slide at the end of this presentation. You'll also find on that slide a link to the Working Group 3 webpage, as well as a link to the common design principles and some other helpful links to help you engage in the EDAM stakeholder process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to Kevin. And Kevin, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining working group number 3, meeting number 3. I would like to start with just a couple of housekeeping items to add on to what Christina has mentioned. She mentioned that we had posted some documents onto the website, so keep an eye out for those. Second, I'd like to remind folks that we will be having next Tuesday's meeting as planned. We won't be rescheduling anything for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. However, the next Tuesday's meeting, so the one that was scheduled for January 25th, will be moved to the morning of the 26th because of the Regional Issues Forum conflicting in the time there. So we'll remind you folks as we go along about those dates, but just starting to plant the seed early. Third, just to support what Christina was saying, if you'd like to make a presentation, please use the comment tool that's in the bottom of the slides. And we have a couple of folks lined up for the coming weeks, so I'm looking forward to that. But we want to make sure that anybody who wants to present on a particular scope item, please get your name on the list soon. I posted a schedule, a tentative schedule of how I see the next coming weeks shaping up. So that's also on the website, and that might help you plan for preparing to present. So I don't have a canned spiel. You guys are lucky today that the conversation topics will be stuff that we've started to discuss already and then some new items, but I don't have a canned presentation. I would like to start out with today's 2 goals, which tie into the agenda that Christina had mentioned. The first is to finalize that design objectives list that we had begun working on, particularly the design objectives for how a market optimization should look. And then second, I'd like to tackle at least one of these group 1 scope items. So you'll remember we took the revised list of scope items, we bucketed the market optimization groups into 3 buckets, or 3 groups. So I want to try to get at least one of those group 1 scope items done. So with that, the topic of the design objectives, I'd like to start with that. So I'll start with these as a reminder. These are meant to be the criteria against which we assess the effectiveness of a market design proposal for a market optimization incorporating greenhouse gas costs. It's likely that no market design alternative will address all of the design objectives simultaneously, so we'll have to find a way to balance these against each other as we pursue a market optimization approach. I think it's still worthwhile having a list of these design objectives, though, even if we individually, as participants in the working group, have different weightings for the objectives. At least we have a shared rubric of items against which we can compare the design alternatives. I'd like to limit this conversation to 30, 40 minutes today, just because I would like to start pivoting to the detailed design discussions in order to stay on schedule and complete those scope items that we've committed to. So the other thing would be, let's please hold off on discussing design objectives related to the carbon reporting topic, as I think we'll have some time to dig into that once we broach that topic. The starting point of these design objectives, just as a reminder, were the design objectives that were included in the EDAM Common Design Principles document that was discussed in December. Then we started to go through those 6 that were in the Common Design Principles document and added a few more over the past few meetings, and we started to dissect those and discuss them, and I'd like to continue and complete that effort today. So with that, let's dig into these design objectives. Christina, would you mind flipping over presenter rights to me, or if I don't already have it?
You should have them.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
And we can see that.
Okay, that's good news, thank you. So what I did, just as a sorry, I'm not sharing the right document here. So these were the first 6 that we had started to discuss, and I would like to revisit these, particularly number 3. But before we do that, I'd like to take a look at some of these down here, if possible, so we can start to add those to the list. I don't want to leave those off and focus on these, just to allow us to start considering some of these new ideas that came up down here. So the first one, and really actually 2 that I'd like to discuss, is allowing for linkage of different carbon pricing programs where possible, and then tie that in with being flexible enough to allow for a single and multiple greenhouse gas zone approach. So what I would like to do is kind of treat this list up here as the ones that we've agreed upon, and slowly move the ones from this bottom section up here if we think that there's merit in doing so. So I'd like to propose that the first one we add up here to be a combination of allowing for multiple greenhouse gas zones, being flexible enough to accommodate that, and allowing for linkage between those programs if indeed they are linked in the policy landscape. So I'd like to open that up to the audience to weigh in on, and if anybody has any objections to me doing so, feel free to raise that as well. So I see I have one person in the queue that's, oh, you can do that by raising your hand. So I'll go to Anya Gilbert, who has their hand raised.
Anya, can you unmute Anya's line? And Anya, don't forget to unmute yourself. There you go.
Great. I think I'm unmuted at this point. I wonder if what the working group's reaction would be to if we up-leveled this to durable market design to accommodate that flexibility and that linkage. So that's a proposal for potentially principle number 7, durable market design. Open to feedback there. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's good. If if you wouldn't mind, maybe if I could make it a little bit more specific, say durable market design that allows for multiple greenhouse gas zones, or does that defeat the purpose of kind of up-leveling it to a higher level of granularity? What do you think, Anya?
I do wonder if there's going to be other areas that we touch on in the future where durable market design might also kind of be an umbrella to capture that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we reflect back to see if our design is durable, there may be other areas where we're looking at that lens beyond what we've listed down below.
Okay. Yeah, I hear that thought. So I believe it was Mary Winkie who suggested this one, the linkage, and Kathleen Colbert who suggested this one. Kathleen or Mary, do you have any objections to just keeping this at the durable market design kind of level of granularity? And does it capture what you were hoping to get out of that? If so, please raise your hand and let us know your thoughts. I see Kathleen. Can you unmute her, please, Roy?
Yeah, I just want to when the durable market design, you said it's replacing which one that I raised?
It would kind of combine. You had raised allow for single and multiple greenhouse gas zones.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
And
Then
this one.
I'm very comfortable with up leveling it. Then thanks for the reminder. Getting a little lost sometimes over these weeks. But yeah, I think high level. All I was trying to get at in mind was let's define the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure we're solving the problem that we need to. And if durable market design captures that idea, I'm good with it.
Okay, thanks. Mary, I see that you have your hand raised too. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah. I mean, I do like the idea of leveling it, and I agree with Anya that there may be other components of durability that we want to that ultimately kind of come into play.
Mm-hmm.
But I do wonder if there is a way to kind of specifically reference like linkage and future policies. I'm not, it's like I kind of feel like the reference to sort of multiple GHG zones feels too specific to me because we don't even know if that's going to be needed or if we're even taking a zonal approach. But I wonder if we could say something like durable market design, including but not limited to reflecting current and future policies and potential linkage or something like that, so that you're not limiting the definition of durability to those things, but you're kind of giving more context to the thought process that we've had here.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna add that just to give a sense of the flavor of what we're talking about here. I think it's a good suggestion, Mary. So, including but not limited to allowing for future policy designs and potential linkage. Okay. Great. I see we have Kathleen and Mary's hands still up. Do you guys want to weigh anything else? Otherwise, I'll move to Commissioner Rendall, who has her hand up.
Nope, I'm putting my hand down. That was just a remnant.
Okay. Commissioner Rendall, do you want to speak? That's Ann Rendall for the operator.
Thank you. Yes, and I would just echo what Mary just said. I think it would be a mistake to not be very specific, that what we're doing here is designing the greenhouse gas design objectives for the greenhouse gas policy that doesn't just cover California. So that will reflect the possibility and the reality of different greenhouse gas zones and possible linkage. So simplifying it just to durable market design ignores what we're doing here. And so I think it does need to be called out. So thank you.
Okay, great. So if no one else has any thoughts, I'm just going to add this one here and confirm that we're capturing it in item number 7. And we can move on to the next one, which was that using a simple solution where possible and avoid administratively burdensome, complex accounting approaches where possible. I agree with this one as well. I don't remember who it was from Public Generating Pool who has their hand raised, but I do see that Leah Fisher has her hand raised. So maybe we can turn to Leah for this next one.
Hey, Kevin. Yeah, so I did suggest this one. I think it's somewhat captured perhaps in number 6. I see we kind of added the simplicity at the end there. So I think as long as we capture the simplicity concept in some way, I'm fine with that. It doesn't have to be the exact language there. Just kind of thinking here in the moment. I mean, maybe something like use simple solutions where possible while balancing precision and implementation feasibility, something like that. But as long as I think that concept is captured, we're fine with doing some modification or modifying number 6 to address that.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of is a run-on sentence here or run-on phrase. There's too many ands. So I'm okay with adding seeking simple solutions where possible and balancing precision and implementation feasibility. So thanks, Leah. I see Mike Castellano from the PDS, his hand raised. Do you want to go ahead, Mike?
Sure. I just want to caution that, making a simple solution a goal, sounds nice, but we got to make sure we do this right also. In the history of CAISA's GHG accounting, there have been a lot of simplifications made that have not, really settled well with the state of California or with the legislation that, California has passed. So if we could add something in there, emphasizing the need for correct and accurate accounting, that would make me feel a lot better.
Okay. Do you feel that, let's see. So we do talk about accuracy in this design objective.
That's not really what we're talking about though. So I think I'm saying in design objective 6, where we're talking about simplicity, we need to say something about maintaining accuracy as well.
Okay, so
I'd like to say something about maintaining accuracy as well.
Does precision capture what you're saying here, or is accuracy an additional incremental phrase here?
I think maybe seeking simple solutions where possible while still prioritizing accuracy.
I would welcome other folks' feedback on that. Maybe I'll put it in parentheses here. Let's see. So, and prioritizing accuracy. So I'll keep that. Thank you for the suggestion. I'll let other folks hop in to see whether they would hop in on that. So thank you, Mike. I'm not sure if Vijay has something to say on this one or if he's got a new one. If you have a new one, let's hold off on that. I want to just keep on number 6 for the time being.
It's on this one.
Okay.
Kevin.
Sure.
Thank you. I think I want to bring up a sort of big picture comment here. If you're seeking simple solutions and the focus is optimization, That's good to know. But then accuracy, are you trying to seek accuracy in terms of accounting? Because you can have accounting that is post-optimization, but you're trying to seek simple solution that reflects and accounts for greenhouse gas part of the optimization. So, and I'm sorry, Vijay with Western Resource Advocates. My request is to be mindful of these often interchangeably used terms. And for the benefit of this entire effort, you are reconciling or adjusting for greenhouse gas through carbon pricing and clean energy issues, part of the optimization conversation, but you're also trying to adjust or attend to accounting needs. So wherever you come up with these objectives, being clear, are you talking for accounting versus optimization? Because accounting is like settlement, reporting. Just trying to bring up a caution perspective for all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point there. We might want to save the accuracy conversation, not to say that the market optimization won't be accurate in accounting for costs, but if what we're trying to capture in the design objective is more about tracking the carbon intensity reporting, we will be talking about design objectives, I hope, when we get to that topic, which should be in a couple of weeks. I'll just turn it back to Mike real quick to see if he wouldn't mind holding off on the prioritizing accuracy wording until we talk about carbon reporting, whereas this list is really meant to capture how the market optimization itself will work. So what do you think about that, Mike?
I think we shouldn't really be talking about separating, or at least conceptually separating how the market optimization will work and how we're going to report the results of the market optimization. I think, whatever we do, saying that accuracy is a matter of accounting is really, I would argue that that's kind of incorrect. You can be accurate in your accounting, but you can also accurately represent the costs and accurately represent the, goals of the legislation in your market design. And I think that's where I'm going with the idea of accuracy. I don't know why I didn't see who that was. Vijay, I think it was. I'm not sure why there would be an idea that the GHG accounting is separate from the optimization. The optimization is what sort of assigns things, and then we have to account for it afterwards. But that, the accounting is really just sort of downloading a spreadsheet, more or less, right? The optimization is where this is actually going to happen. So I no, I would not be comfortable moving that line.
All right. Does anyone else support adding prioritizing accuracy into the list of objectives here? I see a couple names. I think I'll just go in order of who I saw last, which was Kathleen Colbert. Kathleen, do you have thoughts on this one?
Sure, it's Kathleen Colbert from Vistra, and I'll share my thoughts because I think this is also, number 6 is taking let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good, and let's seek simplicity. But I think I actually said let's not reinvent the wheel, but I still like simplicity. That's kind of what simplicity means to me. And I want to respond to Mike and Vijay. It's fair to try to separate out the timing. I don't disagree with anything Mike is saying. I just want to make sure Mike is comfortable with my interest here, which is that let's accurately include it in the market design as far as we can go, as much as possible. Of course, it should accurately represent the program rules. Let's try to minimize leakage risks and all of the complexity with that, which is one of the stickiest issues, to the greatest extent possible. But if we reach a point where the benefits of further complicating the design don't overtake the complexity and cost of doing so, we can take a step back and say, okay, we've appropriately balanced precision and implementation feasibility while also prioritizing accuracy. So if that's what we're getting at, super comfortable. I just don't want to get to a point where we say prioritizing accuracy, there's a little bit there, and now it's a non-starter, is what I'm trying to get at mitigating the risk of. And I think that's the line, but curious to hear Mike's.
Yeah, I'll give Mike a chance to respond, and then we have quite a few other people in the queue, so I'll just give them a chance to weigh in too. Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I don't have an issue with trying to make things, sort of as simple as possible, but still right. I just want to make sure we're keeping the but still right focus in the conversation there. And I'm always a little bit sort of mystified when I'm, working in this industry, when people talk about things getting too complex. What we do is not a simple, the KISO optimization is not a simple thing. The things that we work with every day are not simple things. And, we should be willing to deal with some complexity in order to get them right, I think. So I just, I don't want to find us in a position where the design defaults to something simple and then, it turns into an issue because it can't accurately represent the policy, or the actual costs that need to be represented. So.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So next, I see a number of.
Hey, Kevin, can I respond real quick?
And
I'll let you go on. I promise.
Real quick to weigh in. So let's see who next. Maybe I'll give Claire, and just a reminder, if you wouldn't mind lowering your hands if you do not want to speak. So Claire, can you go ahead?
Thank you, Kevin. I just want to say here, I guess I support what Mike is getting at. I don't necessarily have the solution, but I think what he's suggesting is that, we are seeking simple solutions. We are trying to balance precision and implementation feasibility, but maybe a way to do it is to refer kind of at the end of the sentence about something about to support state greenhouse gas policy objectives or something like that, because I think that is actually behind what the concern is. Accuracy is a goal in support of implementation of a system that will support, that will help achieve state greenhouse gas policy. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a way out to try to just kind of tack on that concept at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, I like it. Let me rewrite it here, and I'll let folks take a read. Balancing precision to support state policy objectives. Okay, so I'll leave that as is and let you guys read it, and I will switch over to Jeff, who I don't think has had a chance to speak today. So Jeff, would you please go ahead?
Thanks, Kevin. Just confirming you can hear me?
I can, yes.
Great. Good afternoon. This is Jeff Spires with PowerX. I just wanted to add that I also agree with what Mike's getting at a high level. I think accuracy in the dispatch and in the market itself is an important objective, and I think that consideration is both in terms of considering the appropriate GHG costs when selecting which resources to dispatch, and then also accuracy in terms of assigning the GHG responsibility to the right resources and to the right entities that goes along with that. So I think it is important to have that as a priority, but I would also just add along the lines of some of the other comments that we have a number of competing priorities in this list, and I think just recognizing we won't perfectly achieve them all. So we're going to have to find a way to assess each of these and evaluate a proposal and identify how good a job it does at meeting each of those various objectives. So, but anyway, I do think that accuracy is something worth contemplating, and we want to get it right.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I have a few other people in the list, and I'll give them a chance to weigh in on this one. But just as a time check, I think we've sort of addressed this one. I want to make sure that we make it to these next through 4. There should be one down here too. Okay, there's a few more left. So I don't want to belabor this one too much. I think we're actually not all that far apart on this one. We want to create a simple solution that's accurate and implementable. But and we can wordsmith it more if we want, but just want to make sure that we give sufficient time to discuss the rest of these. So I'll just go down the list to Alva Svoboda. Alva, would you please go ahead?
Yes, thanks. This is Alva Svoboda at PG&E. Actually, my comment on this probably can result in your removing my item. I think this conflict between optimization and accounting is really fundamental to the GHG and EDAM issue because of commitment. The issue is that with commitment costs, you can't cleanly you can't allocate costs within a period. They have to be allocated over multiple periods, potentially even beyond a single day. But let's just say within a day, you don't have a clean allocation. And so you have to decide on an allocation rule fundamentally based on how much of what's being produced is going to California, say, and how much is not, or going to some other area with a cost. And that rule, in a sense, is just an accounting rule, but it will dictate the optimization, and it will dictate how correct, in Mike's terms, and my terms as well, how correct the optimization is. So I don't know. I don't think accuracy is really the word I would have chosen. I would have used correctness, except that has to do with what the objectives are. But I just wanted to point out that what I'm really talking about in that item goes to this issue as well of what is truly part of the optimization and what is just something that you can do after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. So Alva, while I have you, I think that does the spirit of what you're hoping to get out of this accurate unit commitment item captured in 6?
Yeah, I think
or 6 rather.
In general terms, like I said, I wish a word other than accuracy were being used here, because that sounds like accounting to me, or just measurement, and it's really as more like what you were saying, which was what goes into the optimization is the concern.
Okay, thanks. So I'll go to Todd and then Mary, and then I'm going to move on to some of these additional bullets. So Todd, would you please go ahead?
Thanks, Kevin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, this is Todd with the Center for Resource Solutions. I just wanted to
add a little quiet. Would you mind just speaking up a little bit, please?
Sure. Yeah. Is this better?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. I just wanted to add that I agree with Mike as well. Generally, that conversations around optimization and accounting are not separate. So at the last meeting, I suggested the objective of avoiding double counting and maintaining credible retail transactions of specified power across the West. And I think at that time, Kevin, you said that would fit, better as an objective for the second part on carbon reporting. And today you said something similar, that you wanted to sort of hold off on objectives for carbon reporting until the second, topic area. And I'm fine with that. But I think that this raises a similar concern. And I think my suggestion about an objective related to avoided double counting is related to this idea of accuracy or correctness. We are concerned with avoiding double counting as the market allocates or attributes generation to load in different states or GHG zones. So this objective of avoiding double counting, and specifically avoiding, double counting or impacts to RECs, belongs here too, since optimization for GHG costs for carbon pricing programs does deem resources to GHG compliance zones. So I just wanted to add that context and a little bit more detail to this idea of accuracy or correctness, and that we specifically are concerned with avoiding double counting, not just in terms of carbon reporting, but in terms of the outcome of optimization for GHG costs for carbon pricing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I hear where you're coming from. I do think that ultimately we'll have to make sure that these things all hang together in a comprehensive, set of policy design elements. And I'll just give a little preview to the list. So the hope was to talk a little bit about market optimization, bounce into reporting, so we can kind of get a sense of what these, the just first level set as to what we're talking about here, and then give a chance to talk about some different options that we have here, and then ultimately make sure that they all kind of hang together in an integrated policy objective. So I didn't want to say that it's irrelevant, but I wanted to tackle the optimization question separately first and then see how they hang together. But thanks, Todd. So I'll go to Mary as just the last person on item number 6, if indeed that's what you want to talk about.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. This is Mary Wiki with the public generating tool. I think a little bit just echoing what you were saying. I think we're good with this language, but I do think that it's really important to understand kind of what we're considering correct in terms of, or accurate in terms of the optimization, and then what we're considering accurate or correct in terms of kind of cost allocation or assignment of compliance responsibility. And I think that it's not that those things are separate. It's just that I think we need to be clear about what's being achieved, or it needs to be achieved in optimization, and then what is achieved in potentially a kind of aftermarket solution or aftermarket allocation. And so I do think that those are good kind of different paths to think through, and that correctness or accuracy may mean something different in the different contexts. So just wanted to kind of echo some of the other things that folks were saying. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to move on to this one, which is reporting should be enabled. And I think it does kind of dovetail with the conversation that we were having, which is that a market optimization should probably integrate with a reporting topic. And I agree with that point. I would like to try my approach, and if it doesn't make sense, we can come back to this list. But to say that this reporting should be enabled design objective will be considered when we start talking about how these two, the optimization and the reporting functions tie together. And so this list being focused just on the optimization, I was hoping that we could put this one aside for now, with the understanding that ultimately these will all have to tie together with each other. That would be my suggestion, but if folks think that I'm being a little kooky or simplistic here, I welcome that feedback. Be nice about it, please. But anyway, I'll go to Vijay, who raised his hand, and then Stuart. Actually, I'll go to Stuart first. Sorry, Vijay, but he's the one who had raised this. So I want to give him the first hack at what I had said. So Stuart Kelly, would you please go ahead?
Yeah, I'm finding the interest of time, Kevin, moving ahead with this, and it'll probably get teased out in the specifics. I think the reason I brought this up was, from a California perspective, with transfers into California, we've got a unique circumstance at LA, and just trying to understand what's being delivered. And then when I look forward and potentially moving away from resource specific, it's just trying to understand how all that's going to work from a reporting standpoint, what the Washington requirement may be. There's got to be reporting there, and as we start to separate out volumes and all that good stuff, how do we understand what resource delivered what, and at the same time make sure through optimization that we're bringing in the necessary costs. So I'm okay with the proposal. because I think I'll get teased out, but we've got to make sure that we fully understand how we're going to allocate those transfers so that we can do the necessary reporting ultimately.
Okay. Thanks, Stuart. I agree. I'm gonna strike this one for now, and Vijay, sorry, I did say you'd have a chance to take a hack at it, so go ahead, but just as a time check, I don't want to spend more than 8 more minutes talking about this, so we have 3 more left, so just please try to respect that in your response.
Sure, Kevin, thank you. I definitely don't want to delay everybody. Vijay with WRA. I think this is a comment that even I had raised at the beginning on the reporting. My only I like your suggestion if you want to wait on it till later, but I hope that we don't leave this for the final tail end of everything, because as you agree on market design objectives, it will impact the reporting. The only other aspect I would like to comment on is that reporting should have element of transparency and flexibility on the degree of reporting. So I actually agree with Mike's comments about accuracy in terms of reflecting things. Same goes here. Transparency and accuracy of whatever you report will be based on what is agreed to be optimized. So I just want to highlight the linkage and that you please consider the words transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll move on to this next one. So we have respects transmission constraints. And this came from, if I remember correctly, I'm not even going to try to attribute names here. I don't fully understand this aspect of how the market treats transmission constraints in the context of the greenhouse gas optimization. So I don't want to opine on this one myself, but I think Jeff had his hand up first, and then give Dan Williams a chance to weigh in. Jeff, Dan, do you guys think that this is worthwhile bringing up into the main body? And then I'll give anybody else a chance to take that into consideration and respond to it. So Jeff, please go ahead.
Hi, Kevin. Jeff Spires with PowerX. I think in listening to the conversation and thinking through the objectives, it probably doesn't warrant being included in the list. The context that I was thinking of when referring to transmission was really in the context of accuracy and minimizing leakage. If those are the fundamental objectives, or 2 of them, then depending on how the rules are developed, one criteria to try to achieve that would be assessing deliverability. So if you had a resource, let's just say it's a clean resource, it's outside of a GHG jurisdiction, and we're trying to find criteria to validate that if it's going to be deemed or attributed as being used to deliver import into the GHG area to meet load there, what are the ways that you can validate that that's an assumption that you can make and that it's accurate and doesn't create leakage or other unintended consequences. And so one way to do that would be to say, is it deliverable? Does it have transmission to deliver from its location to that zone or not? So that was really the context that I'd raise that. I think it's an important element of a design, but probably not necessary in terms of the overall objective.
Yeah, thanks. Dan, anything to add on that? And it seems like Jeff would be okay with taking this off or not incorporating it into the main body of the design objectives. Do you have a...
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. This is Dan Williams, Customized Energy Solutions. I brought it up thinking sort of the same line as Jeff there, that this is an issue that is likely there, has been identified as being there in the accuracy of the existing EIM program that would likely be exacerbated with EDAM unless addressed. But I think Jeff is absolutely right. If you get at accuracy and minimizing leakage, then you're going to naturally sort of tease this out. And I think it also is in number 16, I think it's kind of headed in the same direction too. So I support what Jeff just said.
Okay, great. So I'm going to say that this, thanks, Dan, is captured in, I think, 2 and 6, that being the leakage one, which was discussed, you can't see it, and the accuracy one. So just in the sake of time, we'll move on from that one and format that in a sec. So the next one is that the design should start with the status quo of the existing EIM model. And while I think this is an important consideration, I think, and I don't want to put words in Doug's mouth if he's not available to discuss this, but I think the idea behind it was we want a simple solution and one that is feasible. And I hope that this design objective captures that. But I would like to give Doug a chance to respond and make the point maybe that I'm not construing appropriately. So if you wouldn't mind unmuting Doug Howe and give him a chance to respond.
I'm just checking you can hear me.
Hi, Doug. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I might have just worded this a little bit simpler by saying that it starts from the existing EIM model, and maybe we can add a few words to that. But I'm coming from two related directions on this one. First of all, there is obviously an existing GHG system that's being used, has been used in the EIM, and I'm not claiming that that's a perfect system or a good system. I know some people on this call have issues with that system, but what I am saying is that whatever we do with EDAM, it has to operate, the EIM and the EDAM have to operate under the same GHG system. I can't imagine how it could work if there were two different systems there. So I'm laying down one premise for discussion that EIM and EDAM have to operate under the same GHG system. And if that's the case, then it's certainly my opinion that we start with what we have, the EIM model. And if there are aspects of that that don't work, then those should be discussed. And if we can fix those things, then we try to agree on what the fix should be. I don't believe we should start from the premise that the whole system should be tossed out, at least with having some discussion about why. So I think that's really where I'm coming from, Kevin.
Okay. So on the first point, I don't want to, bias the conversation, but I do feel that, we wouldn't be in the wrong area of conversation to say that the EIM and EDAM should be aligned. I think it's something we can discuss, and it shouldn't be taken for granted that EIM is not going to change at all as a result of this greenhouse gas EDAM effort. So that's the first response to this. The second one, I think we will have more of that conversation when we start talking about proposed changes or proposed market design optimizations that are kind of a little more comprehensive than just this list. So in those responses, would you be opposed to me removing this item as a design objective and saving the conversation of where we start from to then when we start getting into the detailed design objectives? Is that amenable to you, Doug? It looks like he's still muted. Go ahead, Doug.
There we are. Okay. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to give me any kind of heartburn. And as long as we can have the discussion, but let me put it this way. I would not want the design objective to be the converse of this, namely that the existing model has to be thrown out and we have to start from scratch. So if we're not saying that, then I'm fine not saying that we're starting from the EIM model.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I want to include that in the design objectives either. So, okay, I'm gonna strike this one. I see that several folks have their hands up. The next one, I think, well, I guess I'll give the floor to some folks who have had their hands raised for a few minutes. So if you don't want to speak, if you wouldn't mind taking your hands down really quick, because I'll base the list off of that. So the next name that I saw come up, and apologies if I'm doing this out of order, was Mike Castellano. So Mike, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. I just wanted to say, it's been a few years since I worked on this, but I recall that the EIM model is mostly based on the idea that you're looking at differences between submitted base schedules and market dispatch. So, we can't do that for EDAM, right? Because I don't think we want anybody to be submitting base schedules for EDAM. So we don't have, it's not the same kind of like compare and contrast kind of setup. So
yeah. So yeah, we will get into that when we talk about the proposed approach for a resource specific attribution method. But yeah, point well taken, Mike. So Stuart, I see that you had your hands raised.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I just wonder if we can get consensus on the point that EDAM and EIM at minimum should be aligned. I think in terms of moving away from the existing construct, I think it would be important to understand the zonal approach that's been given by some others and potential benefits that may come from that, and are the benefits enough to move away from the existing approach, and that can come at a later time in the conversation. But do we all agree in terms of there needs to be commonality in the approach between EDAM and EIM? Because I likewise struggle that you can be creating financial reference points or whatever and have a different construct in EDAM versus EIM. But I'd be interested in what others think.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Stuart. I am happy to open the conversation up to that point. But just to clarify two things. So one would be, just by nature of the timing of the markets, there's certain things that will be inconsistent between the two. So that's, I don't think, what you're saying. The second would be a question to you, Stuart, would be, would you like to add that as a design objective here to say, something along the lines of, to the extent possible, the EIM and the EDAM's approach towards greenhouse gas accounting should be aligned? Is that what you're proposing, or is this maybe a better conversation? I don't know. We had to discuss how.
Yeah, Kevin, I think it rises to, if there's consensus, should that be part of the design objectives here? And if not, obviously we need to have a conversation at a more appropriate time, but why not?
Okay. Let me see what other folks have to say about that. PJ has had his hand raised for a while, so I'll give him a chance to speak, and then Kathleen.
Thank you, Richard WRA. Thank you, Kevin. I think this is a very fundamental issue that deserves a good conversation. Kevin, as you said very well, there is a difference in time frames of transactions between the EIM and what the day-ahead market will be. So I actually agree with Doug and Stuart in saying that we should explore ways for alignment to enhance the efficiencies of all the hard work that's been put into place for the EIM, but recognizing Mike's concern in how greenhouse gas is treated with the EIM, it's part of a gap assessment that should be identified and see where you improve from the EIM, and maybe have an added element of maybe functionality or an additional step in the market run or something that would help capture the greenhouse gas better, accurately in an EDAM. So agree on all fronts that we should have this dialogue in a very thoughtful way before we try to create a whole new blue sky, but at the same time identifying if you try to align the EIM with EDAM, it'd be where there is commonality. Otherwise, you would build on the differences to improve.
Thanks, Vijay. So I'll turn to Kathleen, but before we do that, I just want to do a time check. I'm slipping from my 30 to 40 minute time goal in this one. So I hope you folks won't begrudge me if I cut over to the second half of the meeting shortly. I would like to say that I think we have a really good set of design objectives up here, and then we only have one more, potentially two more topics to discuss, or potential design objectives to tackle. So, Kathleen, if you wouldn't mind going ahead, if you have a response to Stuart, I'd welcome that. But if you,
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I jumped in when Stuart asked the question. So I appreciate the question. This is Kathleen Colbert from Vistra. I think it is a really good principle. At least you have my consensus that it needs to be aligned. I do worry we're getting a little too into maybe designing it right now, as opposed to, I think, like the idea of, let's say, scope definitely includes ensuring that the design holistically achieves the goals we've set, which includes day ahead, real time, and after the fact. And maybe, I know you've called out day ahead and called out the after the fact piece, maybe just adding it to scope can get us to a place where we have it documented that, of course, we're thinking about it through start of day ahead through after the fact, which includes real time. On a principle side, I think, that's where I started, which you combined into number 6. So at least in my mind, it's captured here that we're balancing this precision, trying to achieve these goals. Implementation includes the idea that implementation needs to be aligned, and to achieve the goals, it needs to be coordinated. So I do think it's in the principles if everyone's cool with that. And I'd just suggest making it scope so you don't forget to compare to real time. One other thing, Kevin, I think, since we kind of jumped over the what does EDAM do in a lot of these, even in real time, we'll probably have to take pieces of what Mike raised about how there aren't base schedules for the EDAM entities. Probably not going to have may not have base schedules going into EIM if it's now using the schedules, So it's worth noting it needs to be coordinated.
Yeah, we will get there. Yes, I agree. So Stuart, I don't want to characterize the group's consensus on this point, because it's impossible to characterize the consensus without hearing from everybody. But I would like to maybe just hold off on that. I don't disagree that setting it as a goal is a good idea, but we do have a discrete topic where we talk about rollover to the EIM. And I do think that when we get to the distinct design approaches, we will talk about this and it'll become clearer. So just in the interest of kind of getting this list and wrangling it down to a discrete number of topics, I'm going to just hold off on including that in here, and we'll seek that consensus at a later point. I do want to give one last time before we move on to the second half of the meeting, which is to add this one. I'll just read it and let the public generating pool team weigh in if they'd like to have this included in our design objectives. The design objective will be the potential to allow for resources to direct where energy goes and comes from. I think this is a laudable goal, but it might be something that is better discussed in a detailed design objective rather than or detailed design approach rather than a design objective. So if anybody from PGP has concerns with me striking it from the list, you want to hop in and let me know. Otherwise, I'd like to proceed with this list of 7 items that we have as our design objectives for a market optimization. So I see that Mary has her hand up, and then I'll move on to Drew, who also raised his hand. So Mary, can you go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. And I'm fine with striking that from the objectives, but I just wanted to clarify. I'm not sure this language really captures the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
I think what's important is that entities have to have the ability to direct where things are counted, and how things are counted under state policies. You know, if I'm a utility in Washington and I need my energy and or RECs to count in Washington, then it's hard if I'm participating in a market that is directing that energy elsewhere or somehow identifying that that energy is being deemed delivered elsewhere. So that was more the point I was making. I think it's more about accounting than about sort of what a market design needs to directly accomplish.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mary. So, Drew, can you go ahead and introduce yourself before you do so?
That's fine. I actually didn't even mean to raise my hand. I was taking a screenshot of something that WebEx ended up raising my hand for me, so apologies. But my name's Drew Grissom, and I work for the LCD Light.
Hey, thanks. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close this topic. So thanks everybody who weighed in, and I hope you guys agree with me that this is a pretty good looking list of design objectives that we've crafted here. I realize we have some open items. I don't want to come back to this quite yet, and maybe we can tweak it as we get into the detailed design proposals, but this is looking like a pretty good list to me, and we'll make sure that it's posted onto the website. Next, I want to turn our attention in the second half of the meeting to our list of design scope items while you guys enjoy a beautiful view of Yosemite National Park. Not trying to be biased on behalf of California here, but I do love Yosemite. Anyway, let me just pull up the design scope 1 items here. So what I've done is I've taken this group 1 scope item. So you'll remember that we took the 2 topic areas, and I had taken the first one, which was the market optimization topic, and split it into 3 separate groups. So group 1 is these more overarching questions that would probably apply to multiple design approaches. So I figured we could tackle these early on while folks are starting to prepare the more detailed design proposals. So the group 1 is 3 questions, which you'll see here and which we'll get into in a second. I've rearranged them slightly from the revised scope that we have posted on the website. So I'll start with this first question, which is, what are we optimizing? What costs are we optimizing? And when thinking about this topic, in my mind, there are 2 things to consider. The first is carbon prices. The second would be optimizing RPS, clean energy standard type programs. We have experience in optimizing carbon prices. That's what we do in EIM today. I think they create an easily identifiable short-term marginal cost, which is relatively easily incorporated into a market optimization. So I think the presumption on this one would be that we would optimize greenhouse gas costs. I think this is sort of an assumption that we've been basing a lot of our discussions on, but I don't want to take it for granted. The second, RPS and clean energy standards programs, to my knowledge, we don't currently consider these in our optimization, and I'm not sure that anybody else does in their organized markets. these programs, as far as I understand them, are intended to incentivize investment in building non-emitting assets rather than optimizing their short-term costs. But I don't want to preclude them from being considered in our design approach. So let's start with the carbon pricing aspect here. I think the presumption would be that, yes, we would include this in a market optimization, but I want to give folks a chance to weigh in and say, present some sort of alternative to not considering them or supporting the idea of incorporating them into a market design. So does anyone have any supporting or dissenting opinions? And I'll just start calling your names out as I see them in the list. So I see Alva had his hand raised. Alva, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick point. I think both carbon and RECs are being taken account of by market participants in the market currently. So what you're asking about is where in the market process does CAISO need to capture these because they can't be captured by market participants? And in other words, market participants can't internalize the costs to themselves. So that to me is the question. And I don't know what the answer to it is, but I would phrase it in that way.
Yeah, no, I agree with how you characterized it. So yeah, does anyone feel that there is a need to not incorporate carbon prices, or alternatively, or in addition to that, include some sort of quantification of RPS or clean energy or other those types of programs into the market optimization? All right, I see Doug has his hand raised. Doug, would you go ahead, please?
Checking. You can hear me? Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's a given, certainly, that at least one and soon two states, and probably more than that, are going to have carbon price regimes, and therefore are going to have trading regimes, at least cap and trade regimes, and therefore for them to participate in the market is going to require some kind of optimization of carbon prices for market transactions. But another aspect, and I'm putting it out there just so that we can kind of keep it in the back of our mind to consider, the way in which the EIM works today gives the generator the choice of whether or not they're going to sell into a particular GHG zone or not. And it may be necessary that load serving entities have that option also, that they can refuse certain types of generation to be sold into them. And what I'm thinking about specifically is that there are some utilities that will be in the EIM and presumably in the EDAM that have a CO2 pounds per megawatt hour limitation, which is declining over time, being placed on them. And they may need the ability to block certain types of transactions coming into their load serving entities. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree with what you said. I don't know if that is exactly what this scope item is saying, but I think it's a good point. So if anyone wants to react to that, we can. Otherwise, it might be something that we discuss in this second bullet, second scope item, which is discussing availability. So I think premised in my, in this scope item is we're talking about the generator perspective, but I think Doug raises a reasonable point, which is, do we need to start thinking about load as well? So
can I just respond to that for a second, Kevin, very quickly? The reason I brought it up here is because it occurred to me that this issue that loads might need to control the kinds of market transactions that come into them, that they're syncing, is really a function of the RPS or the CES that they're under, particularly the CESs. And that's why I thought it fit under here, but if it's better to discuss it under the next item, that's fine too.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I meant more this one to be kind of what costs are going to show up in the objective function of a market optimization. But it's hard to say that what you're characterizing might not be characterized as like a constraint on the market optimization. But just thinking about it formulaically. But let's tackle that one second, or if anybody has any kind of differing opinions, let's talk about it in this bullet. So I'll go to VJ next. VJ, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. Vijay WRA. I think I want to pose a question back to you because when I read that, I'm not deflecting. I'm trying to help the dialogue, hopefully. But when you say which costs should be included in the market optimization, to me, it fundamentally, what comes to my mind when you look at carbon pricing is you're capturing using appropriate metric, the externalities of the fossil fuel resource that will be included in the transactions of the day ahead market and agreeing on the how of emission rate, like proxy fossil fuel rate for thermal. If it's unspecified and all that nitty gritty can be addressed. But at the very high level, when I look at your question, very literally speaking, it is really making sure that the externality costs are captured for fossil fuel imports, especially into greenhouse gas zones or states where there are requirements, and vice versa, where it gets to Doug's point, logically, is the transacting LSE or BA, if it's EDAM BA level, in a non-greenhouse gas state, has the flexibility to choose what bid they want to honor and transact. So I think the question would be what kind of costs need to be included, and I think that if it's a policy question, my answer is very simple. The externality associated with fossil fuel that is trying to interact with non-fossil fuel or clean energy resource, which should be lower cost in the pecking order automatically. So I think that's a no-brainer. I don't mean to trivialize it, but that's across many rich organized markets. So, but I could use help. I didn't know what you were exactly meaning there, please. I agree with Doug on Doug's comment, but sorry.
Yeah. I wanted to situate this more in, rather than starting with the externality, I think it has to be tied to a particular program that actually imposes costs, private costs rather than social costs. I think that's what we want to capture in the optimization, but I may be wrong. Mary, do you want to respond or hop in on this topic?
Yeah, thanks. Mary Minke with the Public Generating Pool. I tend to agree. I think when I think about sort of attempting to optimize RPS or CES standards, I struggle with sort of how that works. I'd be interested in, if any entities in this work group have a proposal, I think it'd be interesting to see that, but I struggle kind of from a policy and market perspective in terms of how that would work, as opposed to carbon policies which place a direct cost on emitting resources or, imports from emitting resources. I did also wanted to respond a little bit to the comment that Doug made about a desire or need for entities in certain states to sort of block certain transactions or be able to, identify where all of their imports are coming from. I think it's really important to kind of understand what the trade-offs are with an approach like that. If that is, basically if you can still achieve the benefits of an organized market while maintaining that kind of bilateral objective. I think that's something this conversation has been happening in Washington over the last couple of years, and I think it's been a real struggle there for the utilities to see how organized markets and some of these kind of deliverability and delivery concepts are compatible. So I think it's worth the discussion, but I think it's really important for us to kind of understand what the technical trade-offs are in terms of trying to achieve something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would also welcome if anybody has any, just, throwing a piece of Play-Doh at the wall to see if it sticks idea on how RPS and CES type policies could be modeled in a market, or if there's a fully developed one out there I'm just maybe not aware of. But I'd welcome that aspect. But I'll give Doug a chance to respond to Mary because he had raised his hand. So, and if anybody else wants to weigh in, you can raise your hand as well. So, Doug, please go ahead.
I think, in at least partial response to Mary, I'd say that, whenever we're to fact, and whenever we're trying to build into a market design, particular state policies, California's own GHG policies, soon to be Washington's, you're going to end up with something which is not always going to be purely economically optimized. I mean, I think that's a given, that putting these elements, putting these constraints into market optimization is going to result in the best you can get within the constraints, but not the best that you can get. The particular example that I brought up, which was a load serving entity that has a statutory limitation on it in terms of what its annual GHG emissions are allowed to be. If the option is we're just not going to even take that into account in the market, then the option for that particular utility is, well, I can't be a market then. And I think that that's what we're trying to accomplish here, is a club that starts excluding members because of particular state policies. So I agree, we have to have a discussion about it. And if it becomes overly problematic, maybe the only solution is that certain entities can't be members of the market then.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Claire, do you want to respond to Doug or bring up something new?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I guess the way I look at it is, when we think about what the market design needs to optimize, I think we should also think about what is absolutely critical that this market design does and what can we achieve through other objectives. And so when I think about an RPS, a clean energy standard, those type of programs have for years been tracked through renewable energy credits. And as I think I said last week, renewable energy credits were created in the context of organized energy markets. ERCOT was the first place they popped up. So my view is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We do have a mechanism for doing better accounting of procurement by utilities in light of existing RPS as well as clean energy standards. There may well be a need to improve how those tracking attributes are created and tracked, including possibly more temporal granularity, but we can do that outside of the energy market design. So I don't see that there's a need here to optimize or to attempt to optimize for RPS and clean energy standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug, I see your hand is still up. Did you still want to speak, or are you?
No.
Okay, thanks. I see Vijay. If you wanna hop in here, please feel free.
Thank you, Vijay WRA. I partially want to agree with Claire, I think, in what she said, but I would like to recommend that if these are slippery slope between what are we optimizing, then comes the how and what instrument, but if you were to consider the proposal of an all generation certificate tracking, you will be able to, as you're going to optimize for all resources in your EDAM market, you would need an all generation certificate, just like you have in some of the Eastern markets. And in that information, you would account and reflect the REC information that reflects clean energy targets and information that the states need part of the settlement. So I agree in the sense that we leverage the REC and that everything that is currently in place with the RPS tracking and accounting. But if you're looking at an all generation based optimization, you just have to agree on what carbon price and how you would address between greenhouse gas and non-greenhouse gas zones. So that's my request, in keeping in mind the concept of all generation certificates, because you're looking at all generation optimization. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So I think that we are reaching a consensus position here that we should include the carbon externality costs arising from greenhouse gas pricing policies in the market optimization. I think there hasn't been any specific agreement or is that a word? Proponents of including costs associated with RPS and clean energy standards via RECs in the market optimization. If anybody has a dissenting opinion on that, I'll give them one last chance to weigh in. Otherwise, I think we can deem this scope item as being kind of closed out. All right, hearing none or seeing no hands raised, let's move on to the second topic, which is the topic of availability and what rules need to be developed for an EDAM's availability rules. So to me, this deals with the voluntary nature of serving greenhouse gas zones for resources outside of greenhouse gas zones, though we might have to get into what Doug was saying a moment ago. But the way that I had envisioned the scope topic to be was to answer two questions. One is, should serving a greenhouse gas zone be voluntary in an extended day-ahead market? And if we agree that it should be voluntary, how frequently can a scheduling coordinator elect to serve load in a greenhouse gas zone? On the first item, I'll give a little bit of a starting point as well, that the presumption is that serving a greenhouse gas zone likely should be voluntary. And this arises from how the EIM works today, which is a voluntary participation in that. And the reason why that is voluntary is FERC, in approving our initial EIM filing, had told us that it needs to be a voluntary participation to serve load in a greenhouse gas zone, in particular the California ISO's zone. So I think that's probably a reasonable starting point for an extended day-ahead market, that a similar rule would be imposed, or at least a proposal that we submit for an extended day-ahead market would include a voluntary participation model. The second item, I think, will be premised on the first, so maybe we take some thoughts in on this first item, which, as a reminder, is, will availability to serve load in a greenhouse gas compliance area be optional or mandatory? And there might be some nuances, gray areas here. So I'll give Stuart a chance to hop in. Stuart, can you go ahead?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. Yeah, maybe just not consider it as voluntary. I think we, basically need a way of, or a mechanism to reflect the cost depending on whichever zone that we're bidding into. So I think it's voluntary and a mechanism to reflect the cost and optimization. So we need that optionality from that standpoint as well.
Sure. Would you mind maybe giving me an example of what you're referring to here, or maybe I just wasn't listening closely enough?
Yeah, for resources that are, bidding into, let's take, for example, California, and they want to bid in the GHG component versus, and that would be part of the bid, put in as a bid order and part of the bid, the price, versus they would exclude that if there isn't a requirement in another state, or indeed just theoretically, if Washington had something completely different, you may want to reflect a different cost. So the overall cost of your bid, you need some flexibility in compiling that bid based on the cost associated, be it energy, be it GHG or carbon pricing or whatever. So we need some optionality to make sure that we have a level playing field throughout the whole market.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. So you wouldn't disagree that characterizing this as being a voluntary participation?
Exactly. I'm building on the voluntary aspect, but it's just not from a voluntary standpoint. There's also the mechanics of making sure that you're reflecting your costs in the different zones. So we need it for two reasons. You may not want to bid in a certain market, but if you want to bid in multiple zones, we will need this flexibility.
Okay, thanks. All right, Alva, please go ahead. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, just on the topic of daily versus hourly, I think making the choice hourly is going to tend to lead to the possibility of strategic bidding that you really don't want to allow because there's going to be bid cost recovery that will be based on commitment decisions. So I think if you're looking at what the time granularity of that should be for a particular resource, I would just say hourly is quite risky for being able to prevent strategic bidding behavior.
Okay, that is a good point, and let's get to it after we've kind of conquered this voluntary versus mandatory participation question. But I think it's a good point, and one it's a string we should pull a little bit further, because it's not something that I had considered before, Alpha. So thanks for raising it. Sure. I saw that there were a couple of chat questions. Christina, would you mind reading out Kyle's question? I popped up, but I didn't get a chance to read it.
Yeah, so Kyle, I'm not sure he was, Kyle Frankiewicz. Let's see, hold on a second. He has one above as well. So let me just scroll up.
Or Kyle, speak to. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I have a remedial question. What is a GHG zone? Is it a zone where regulatory requirements create a price for GHG?
Yes. Yeah, that's how I was thinking about it.
Okay. And it's second question. Also, what does volunteering mean? Is the buyer/LSE volunteering to accept thermal megawatt hours, or is the seller volunteering to sell thermal megawatt hours, which means accepting a GHG price adder?
Yeah. So I think when we had originally thought about this scope item, it was the second, being, do generators have an option to either sell into a greenhouse gas zone or to elect not to do that? The reason being that if you sell into a greenhouse gas zone, you have to abide by certain compliance requirements. So we might want to have a market that doesn't force people to comply with those rules. And there might be other legal reasons for that, which I'm not an expert in, so I'm not going to speak to those. But Doug had brought up an interesting point, and I think it was something that Mary also boosted as well, which was there might be a day in which load serving entities might need to preclude themselves from receiving fossil or carbon intensive generation to the extent that that's possible. So we might also want to add into this topic, I think we have kind of this overall bullet, which is optional. And then we have a frequency question, which is what Alva was speaking to. But then there's an additional question of, can it be voluntary by demand versus supply, basically? I don't know the answer to that. Voluntary by demand or supply, or supply, I should say. So, I don't know the answer to that. I think I haven't heard anybody disagree with the voluntary nature of suppliers electing to serve greenhouse gas zones. So I want to, I don't want to leave that topic quite yet or assume that it's been settled. But this second question of whether LSEs can elect not to receive them is, I think, probably an important consideration. So, yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Maybe I can go to VJ, who's had his hands up for a little while, and then I'll go to Alva. Go ahead, VJ.
Thank you, Vijay, WRA. So I appreciate you clarifying that frequency because I was confused earlier with everything between the optional and frequency. I could be wrong here, but my initial reaction, please, is that I don't think you want to restrict the supply because we're not just talking about greenhouse gas accounting in terms of fossil fuel or thermal power, which has greenhouse gas. You could have renewable energy that's packaged as well in a day-ahead market transaction by the same LSE wanting to export two different sets of transactions. One is renewable energy and one could be a whole chunk of fossil fuel based. So I think the supply side should be, I could be very mistaken here, but any entity participating in the EDAM should have unrestricted ability to dispatch X amount of megawatt hours, whether it is greenhouse gas heavy or not. The demand side, I think, is an interesting creative thought where the LSE that's importing that power is subject to whatever state requirements they may have, and that market price signal should account for that in the cost that they will have to incur if they choose to not take a certain amount of megawatt hour because the CO2 intensity is very high or not meeting their state level criteria. This gets back to one minor complication I want to add. If I understand in the transmission group, you are looking at EDAM at the balancing authority level. Here you're talking LSE. So what is the unit? What will be the level of transaction settling and decision making? That I would urge some thought on that. But I prefer supply to be unrestricted, completely available. Demand side have more flexibility because they're ultimately the buyers, whether they're price makers or price takers. Thank you.
Yeah, your second question is the greenhouse gas compliance area one, and it's still in this group one scope items, but I don't know. I would like to save it for next week.
Sure. Thank you. But thanks for taking my thoughts here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll turn to Alva in just a moment. I would like to see if anybody has a dissenting opinion on having this be optional, suppliers electing to not serve greenhouse gas zones, leaving that option for them. So Alva, would you go ahead, please?
Sorry. Yeah, actually, I would agree with if you're going to follow the model of the EIM, supply needs to have the election. I just wanted to point out, and I think you were probably mulling it over, that on the demand side, it's a lot more complicated because in the day-ahead market, the demand can bid. However, whatever is not satisfied in the day-ahead market is going to be served by the EIM process and by each BAA, essentially, irrespective of any. There's no demand bidding per se in the real-time markets, and I'm speaking California because I don't know for sure whether other balancing areas have demand bidding in real time. But that makes for quite a bit of complication in terms of making an election for the day-ahead market. You may not be served anyway because of your bidding, and then the remainder of what you want to serve will go without an option into the real time. So I think that really complicates the idea of a demand side election.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And just a reminder, if you no longer have interest in speaking, please lower your hand. But I'll turn to Dan Williams. Please go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Kevin. Dan from CES. So not really dissenting opinion so much as just being cognizant that decisions made here also have to fit within kind of the realities of the market design as well. And if you sort of take this to the extreme and say that there's a handful of BAs filled with resources that are thermal based that don't want to be dispatched into certain GHG zones, you have to make sure then that the other aspects of the market can recognize that as well when it comes to things like resource efficiency and transfers and overall dispatch. So it's worked fine, so well, kind of in the EIM so far, because there's kind of been an unlimited supply pool of zero GHG resources being willing to be dispatched to California. But if the EIM community decided that none of them wanted to make them available to be dispatched in to meet California's needs, the market kind of breaks down.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you know, I haven't been able to follow the other working groups as closely as I would want, but we definitely need to make sure that we're tying this in with the other ones. I think we do have a dedicated day, or at least we can create touch points to make sure that is happening. And if we need representatives from that working group or folks who are on the call today to weigh in on that, I would welcome that. But yeah, point taken, Dan.
And I think some of the things that Jeff mentioned around the deliverability aspect do kind of take that up anyway. But
yeah, that's a great point. Okay, I see Doug, and then once Doug's done, I'd like to turn ourselves just to the frequency question, with the hope of if we can't close down this scope item about can demand elect not to receive greenhouse gas intensive energy, we can maybe cut this off as its own separate scope item. But I want to talk about the frequency here and touch on a point that Alva was making. So I'll turn to Doug, and then we can move to the second element of the scope item. Or if anybody has any opinions on supply, but I think I haven't heard any yet. So.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I just want to make a final remark or two on this issue of can demand elect. I'm not seeing it as being quite as complicated as others are seeing it, and maybe that's my own naivety on this issue. But I think it's accomplishable, but even more than that, I think it's going to be a necessity as we start getting into the serious years of various states' CESs, which I'm saying are distinct from RPSs. So they have clean energy goals, some of which be met through RECs and RPSs, but much of which has to be met through non-GHG or low GHG emitting resources. They're going to need a tool to be able to manage their market transactions, or they're simply going to resort to doing everything under a PPA and then self-schedule everything in the market, in which case, why be a member of the market? I'm not envisioning that it is something as complicated as I and LSE have a 400 pound per megawatt hour portfolio limit. CAISO optimized that for me. I'm not envisioning something that is like that. I am envisioning that they would have the opportunity to say, in this particular period, I elect not to receive any coal, or I elect not to receive any natural gas. And to the point that was made a little bit earlier, that really complicates things, I think we have to remember, that if an LSC says it's not going to receive any coal or gas or any other GHG emitting resource, it still has to pass some sort of a resource sufficiency test in order to participate in the market. And its resource sufficiency test is certainly going to have to take into account that it can't count any fossil generation of a particular type towards that. So I don't see the problem as being intractable here. I don't see it as being much more complicated than allowing generators to self-select whether or not they're going to participate in a particular zone in the market. I'll leave it there.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Doug. I see a couple more hands were raised. I would like to just touch on this topic of frequency, and it's possible that we don't resolve it today. But I just want to be responsive of time and making sure that we can do a debrief at the end with Brian and talk about Thursday's meeting. So actually, yeah, with that in mind, I actually would like to take the next two comments. I'm going to save this frequency topic for next meeting and allow the rest of the discussion on this kind of voluntary nature of the market to be discussed by, I think I saw Mary's hand go up first and then Claire, and then just a reminder, if you wouldn't mind lowering your hand if you no longer want to speak. So I'll turn to Mary first. Mary, please go ahead.
Kevin, I actually wanted to just really agree with Doug that there does need to be a tool. States have to know that the policies that they put in place are being complied with, and there needs to be some tool to demonstrate compliance. And I think what I would just hope the conversation could be is that it's not the market is not necessarily that tool. That a market design or a market optimization is not necessarily the right tool to accomplish those goals, similar to what Claire and Vijay have referenced in terms of looking at a GAT system or some type of a system that accomplishes those goals. That again, it's not papering over, how entities are complying, but a different approach. And so I totally agree that a tool is needed. I just think, what this group should think through is what is that tool, and is kind of the market optimization the right tool to accomplish those policy goals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. And I think maybe I'm not cutting this conversation off quite yet, but I agree that it might tie into the second kind of bucket of topics that I had discussed about carbon reporting. So maybe we can leave that there for now, unless Claire has anything to say. I still see Dan, Doug, and Mary's hands up. If you guys want to add anything else, you can leave them up, but if not, please lower them. But Claire, go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. This is probably not a surprise given my previous comment, but I would be opposed to basically providing optionality for load serving entities to elect not to receive based on greenhouse gas intensity or in specific hours. I think we go down that road. We're moving down in the direction of trying to force the market to track or assign electricity from generation to specific utilities. And I think the market falls apart at that point. It collapses to a bilateral market and it doesn't work. And I completely agree with Mary's point that we have alternative tools to do that, and we don't need to try to force that outcome in the market design. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. We'll make a note of that and consider that, and hopefully broach that topic when we get to the second topic set. So I see still Claire, Mary, and VJ have their hands up. I'll turn to VJ next, and then Mary, and then I'd like to stop the conversation there and turn it over to Brian. So go ahead, VJ.
Yeah, thank you. Vijay with WRA. This gets to a very fundamental issue that I raised earlier, and I respect the fact, Kevin, you thought that reporting earlier on was not part of the design objective. This is what gets to the very critical point. What you decide to optimize for the market will have its own share of accounting. And then what you decide to do post-optimization will be essential from a reporting perspective. So if we are going to develop a tool or look to an external framework and leverage that, then we have to be very mindful what can be addressed and tackled there versus what will be required part of the optimization. And I actually want to agree with Claire on not making too many options available on in terms of optionality of participation or not, because then you are creating more transaction costs as well, and also modeling nuances and lose the whole consistent market footprint for a day-ahead market. So long story short, I do think there are optional tools available. WI has made a request to you all to make a presentation on that. And I think we can marry smartly what is optimized fully, what's reconciled in there, and what can be accounted for outside through a tool. Thank you.
Yeah, duly noted. Thanks, VJ. And I think that brings to the end our sort of technical conversation today. I want to turn it over to my colleague, Brian Jacobson, to give a little recap of what we discussed today, and then ask him to kick it back to me so we can talk about what tomorrow, or rather Thursday's meeting looks like. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give the floor to Brian for a few minutes.
Thanks, Kevin. Let's try and recap the last hour and a half. So on the first topic, we did complete the review of the design objectives and consolidated the various proposed additions into the core set. The primary topics discussed there was the concern that simplicity may compete with accuracy. So I think that bullet item was adequately expanded to cover that concern. There was a common concern regarding the accuracy applying to optimization, but also separately applying to reporting. So we're going to cover, Kevin's suggestion was to cover the reporting later, but it recognizes that they are connected. So I think we did, again, capture that concern in the objectives. And I think one of the final common discussions in that area was the alignment of the EDAM with the EIM or real-time market in general. So a lot of good discussion there. We needed to avoid several comments about avoiding differences between those two paradigms, but certainly there are differences, and we need to, as an objective, try and align them as much as possible. Align the principles as well as the the transfer from the day ahead to the real-time market. And then finally, the final topic on the objectives was the, let's see. No, I think that was the final topic on the objectives. The last two items were discussed and adequately resolved into the core objectives, number 6 primarily. So with that, Kevin did capture all of those consolidations and I think indicated that he'll post that updated document onto the website. Then we moved on to our topic number 2, and that is getting into the meat and potatoes of the group 1 design items. So the first one was, what are we optimizing? A lot of good discussion on including RPS, CES in the optimization or out. Seems that there was a general consensus that including RPS, CES in the optimization is a challenge. That is more likely that the optimization would be more centered around carbon pricing in the optimization. The next topic covered was the final topic that got the last 30, 20 minutes of conversation, the elements of the voluntary nature. Basically, should you separate the voluntary question between supply and demand? Comments about the daily versus hourly, and that the hourly may pose some risks to some strategic bidding behavior. And then the final conversation that we ended on was the supply versus demand elective options. I think that it was more easily conceivable for the supply elect options, but the demand elective options seem to be a little more of a challenge and may require some more discussion. So that is my summary, and we'll capture that in our notes, as well as the modifications that Kevin had captured on the design document itself. Kevin, back to you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so I just want to talk about next week. I want to continue on discussing Group 1 scope items. And I think that will include sort of the second half of that topic that we were discussing earlier, and the concern that Brian had just mentioned that was raised by PG&E, which is the frequency at which the election to serve load is made, and whether or not that's in always, well, I guess daily, hourly, or if there's some sort of other unit, and maybe discuss some of the gaming opportunities around that, and if a market design needs to factor that in. The next one will be identifying the area that we're talking about here, and I expect that we will have a pretty lively debate about this and might not be able to resolve this scope item in that meeting. But I do want to give folks a chance to kind of weigh in on this. And so you'll see the revised scope posted onto the website, and it'll give you a better sense of what I'm talking about here. But I think that the greenhouse gas compliance area question will come up next, and we might be able to touch on different participation options for different resource types, and maybe get into some of those details. But that's what I'm thinking about for Thursday's meeting, and I encourage folks to think about if they want to present and take a look at the schedule we have posted on the website as a guide to when their discussions might best fit in. And if you want to, Christina's link up here, the SurveyMonkey link is what you want to use to indicate your desire to present. So with that, I will turn it over to Christina if you have anything else to say. Otherwise, I think we can call it. And thanks everybody for joining us today. And I really appreciate everyone's contributions. So thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining. Greatly appreciate it. If you have any follow-up questions, you can use the SurveyMonkey link shown in the slide, or if you want to present like Kevin mentioned. So thanks all. We'll talk to you on Thursday. Have a nice rest of your day.